Hello there, coming to you from the bunker. This is episode 21 of Watchtower in Focus, the show that zooms in on all things JW, bringing the governing body and its teachings and policies under microscopic scrutiny. As an organization, Jehovah's Witnesses have always tended to ignore criticism rather than battling it litigiously, as in the case of other groups. Until now, here at JW Survey, we have been keeping quiet about evidence of Watchtower's increasingly mean vindictive streak. But tonight, we are finally ready to lay our cards on the table. Joining me for this special episode are my regular co-hosts, Mark O'Donnell, otherwise known as John Redwood, and a man of many talents, some of which include newsreading, Covert Fade.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, Lloyd. Hi, everybody.
But as you will have by now seen, we also have not one, but two other guests, namely ex-JW activist Jason Wynne from Ireland and from Australia, an ex-JW friend of mine who also happens to have a legal background, Kim Silvio. Jason and Kim, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Morning, Lloyd.
Fantastic. So it's difficult to know where to begin. As I mentioned, we've been sitting on this for a while. Long story short, since 2017, Watchtower of Pennsylvania has issued DMCA notices and secured subpoenas in an attempt to stem the escalating number of leaks of both sensitive data and general files and videos. And I can reveal that I have been on the receiving end of a cease and desist letter from Watchtower's legal department, as has our guest here today, Jason. So now that I've dropped that bombshell, I'm just going to, and I will come back to my own cease and desist letter, but maybe, Mark, you have been kind of meticulously pulling together the facts of this story. What can you tell us?
Well, it really is a fascinating story because prior to 2017, Watchtower was really not that litigious when it came to going after websites. Obviously, websites have only been around for a few decades. And one thing that I learned was that a little over 15 years ago, Watchtower went after a website called watchtower.ca that was operated by a former Jehovah's Witness in Canada. And what Watchtower had failed to do, this was back when Watchtower was watchtower.com or .org, and they did not own the watchtower.ca domain. Someone else bought it. It happened to be an ex-JW, and this person had every right to buy it, but Watchtower didn't agree. And of course, it was what was Watchtower called an apostate website. It had a lot of information, documents, files on it. So Watchtower was decided to take this particular individual to court, and they actually threatened him with a $100,000 lawsuit. I'm not going to mention his name, but I'm sure he'd be willing to talk about it if he could. But they basically demanded that he cease and desist all activities by owning a website containing the information or apostate information that he had put on that website, and that if he didn't, they would sue him for a minimum of $100,000 plus court costs and other things. And they actually forced him to sign a settlement agreement, and he had to give up the web domain and agree to all of their terms. And of course, this was back during a time when there weren't a lot of ex-JWs to support him and to direct him to, legal counsel and even pro bono counsel. And so what ended up happening was that he signed Watchtower's agreement, and that domain was turned over to Watchtower, which of course later was merged into jw.org. So that was over 15 years ago. Fast forward to the last 2 years, and we've seen an incredible amount of people coming forward, not from outside of the organization, but from within the organization, people who are elders, circuit overseers, and others who are anonymously leaking information to a multitude of places. And it's coming from global sources. And Watchtower is frantically trying to plug the leaks and go after those individuals who have posted this information on a number of places, such as Facebook, Reddit, SoundCloud, Instagram, YouTube, Google, and several websites, including JW Survey, Avoid JW, which was the site that Jason used to own several years ago. He started that site, and Watchtower went after it. We'll get into that. But they have gone after, first and foremost, they've issued DMCA requests. And for those who don't know what that is, it's Digital Millennium Copyright Act. So without getting into a long legal discussion, it means that an organization can defend itself against its copyrighted materials being used against its judgment or against its, so what they do is now Watchtower has realized that we've got these leaks that are all over the place. People put them on Facebook, YouTube, Google, etc., Microsoft OneDrive, and they started realizing they've got a problem, because not only was it their material that appears on their website, like books and magazines, but it was secret documents. It was the Circuit Overseer Guidelines. It was the Branch Organization Manual. It was the Shepherd the Flock of God secret Elders Manual, and all of the body of elders letters that were issued by Watchtower from headquarters in New York to all congregations, as well as throughout the world. So they're wondering, and they're upset at why these letters, which are obviously being leaked by elders and even circuit overseers, how they're getting out. And they have launched a global campaign to identify the infringers of their patents. So step one is to issue DMCA takedown notices, which means get the material off the internet. Step two is they go this final step, which is to identify the infringers of their patent. And during the course of my research, I discovered that since 2017, there have been well over 40 or 45 cases where the Watchtower of Pennsylvania, which holds the copyright on the published works, has gone to the Southern District of New York in New York State and has demanded of at least 6 different judges subpoenas, not to get rid of the information. They've already done that. They got the information off the internet, but they've demanded the information to identify the infringers of the patent. So what that means is they're on a witch hunt. They're trying to identify the individuals who are responsible for this and collect all of that data and find a common point in that data to see who is behind all of these leaks. So the irony of it...
Sorry, go on.
Yeah, well, I was going to say the irony of it is that the majority of the people who are posting this information online or sharing it are not the leak sources. The leak sources are people well embedded in the organization that are giving it to various individuals who have social media accounts, and they're posting it online. So, you know, they're chasing their tail here, and it's somewhat of a dead end. I'm sure Jason can comment a little bit more about this, and as you can.
Well, I'm going to open up to the panel, but before I do, would it be accurate to say, Mark, that this is, I'm not saying that, that this is definitely the cause, but would it be fair to say that this obsession with shutting down copyrighted material, and you could say shutting down criticism, has intensified following Pillowgate, basically?
Yeah, that's a very good point,
we've been talking about this, and the timing does seem to be a little bit curious there.
Well, let me share something, and we can come back to this, but I'm going to share something on screen with our viewers. And what this is a basic spreadsheet, and let me know if you all can see the spreadsheet. So what we're looking at here, let me get this full screen. So what we're looking at here is the cases from 2017 at the top, and then all of the cases from 2018. And most of these were filed in the Southern District of New York by Watchtowers attorneys Philip Brumley, Paul Polidoro, and even Mario Moreno. Yeah, these are the three main guys.
So I'm looking at 4 in 2017, and
right.
Pillowgate was released, I think, in January 2018. It seems to me to have been a bit of a flood since then.
Right, because I think they're coming to realize that, JW Survey and whoever owns Avoid JW, they're not the leak sources. These are not the people who are going in and taking the documents from Watchtower. They're beginning to realize that. So now they're trying to flush out who it could be. And they're doing it by going after Facebook and YouTube and all of these to dig into whoever the infringer is of their patent. So you're right. We go back to 2017 with the release of multiple videos, including the Pillowgate video. The July 2017 JW Broadcasting was leaked something like 6 months in advance. Yeah. And then we get into the 2018, and we'll come back to this, but you can see a list of all of the people that Watchtower of Pennsylvania has gone after, bringing us all the way up to 2019. And we'll come back to this because it's very significant, because 2 of the cases involve Watchtower getting stonewalled by Facebook and another internet provider.
Yeah, there's a lot to this story.
There's a lot to it. So I'm going to bring this off screen and we'll come back to it.
Sure. But I just want to, Covert, I just want to talk about this whole issue of not just kind of chasing after copyright, because we all understand, we all get it, that Watchtower is using copyright law to stifle criticism. We get that. There isn't really anything extraordinary about that. But what I would imagine is of concern to you as an activist who operates anonymously due to the threat of shunning is that Watchtower is actively pursuing people's identities.
Yeah, this is concerning because obviously the reason that what will happen if Watchtower finds a leaker. Now, one could say, if they were to simply say, well, if you're in Bethel, you must leave Bethel because you've leaked our copyright material. And if that was the end of it, you could say, okay, well, that's maybe fair enough. The problem is that if they catch whoever's doing this, it won't just be a question of you have to leave Bethel. If assuming that this leaker isn't, or, there are many leakers presumably, and they could be all over, but I'm just taking this as an example, that person will be subject to a religious trial, probably for apostasy. If found guilty, which they probably will be, and of course the religious trial, they will have no defense lawyer. The process will be opaque. No one will be allowed to see the process. That person will then be considered disfellowshipped, which means they will lose all their family and friends. So all their social contact will be taken away and their life will basically be destroyed. So Watchtower going after a leaker, it's not like a corporation trying to find someone who's leaked something embarrassing and they'll just fire you. It's literally this person will have their life destroyed, and everybody they love and everybody they know will be ripped away from them. And the process via which it is done will be the same opaque, unaccountable process that takes place behind closed doors, which no one else can see or observe. So the concern here is that leakers who are leaking everything, and some of this stuff is just copyright material, but some of this exposes, for example, critical failures in Watchtower's child abuse policy. Some of this material, for example, the branch manual, I believe, was instrumental in getting Jeffrey Jackson on the stand in the Royal Commission. It exposed that Watchtower was trying to deceive the Australian Royal Commission, and the exposure of this confidential material allowed the Royal Commission, which was a legitimate government investigation, to get Jeffrey Jackson on the stand and make him testify. So this is an example of how these leakers are acting in the public good. They are doing a public service. But if they are found by Watchtower, Watchtower will, via a process of essentially a religious legal system, destroy that person's life. So this is why it's so important. I mean, not only is it about Watchtower using copyright to stifle online criticism, it's about Watchtower trying to destroy the lives of people who in some cases are exposing instances of terrible child abuse or other human rights violations.
Covert, I want to interject one thing to back up what you just said. If any of our viewers are watching this saying, well, Watchtower is not really going to disfellowship someone who leaked a document, think again, because the individual who removed the documents from several congregations in the northeastern United States, who was responsible for what we call the Palmer leaks, that individual was disfellowshipped for stealing those documents. And the two witnesses that were used in his case were a disfellowshipped person and a unbaptized person. So they broke all rules in finding two witnesses to testify against this individual. But I'll throw it back to you guys, but that absolutely does happen, did happen, and will happen to these people who are technically JWs who are leaking files, because they're going to consider it stealing.
Well, with this episode, I think we're taking a deep dive into just how malicious Watchtower can be. Kim, I've brought you on this show for two main reasons. Firstly, you have a legal background, so maybe you're in a stronger position than we are to wrap your head around all this. But second of all, I think I'm right in saying that you're fairly recent in awakening to the truth about the truth, as it's often called. What's your reaction to all of this?
Look, I'm not surprised whatsoever. If you look at the damage that's done through leaked information and people finding out the truth about the truth, it's not hard for anybody to come to the conclusion that it is going to damage Watchtower's brand. It's going to reduce numbers, people are going to be educated, and as we all know, higher education is highly frowned upon because of the fact that it does give people the ability to make decisions independent of Watchtower doctrine. So I think it's not a surprise to me that they're going after people to try and seal the leaks and stop the knowledge being shared with general witnesses.
I think one of the really distasteful things about this is that obviously Watchtower has a volunteer legal department at its disposal and, endless resources to throw at an activist or a YouTuber. But once this legal process is started, I think I'm right in saying that it could potentially bankrupt a person trying to pay to defend themselves, regardless of whether they are in the right.
Absolutely. And the other thing that I really wanted to point out is that those people who are making the announcements and leaking the information and really educating people who are in the organisation and people who are sort of questioning, and for people who have recently left or left many years ago but still had a lot of emotional issues, they're doing it as a service to those people and they're helping people. They don't get paid. I mean, if you do get any financial back, really very, very minimal. It certainly doesn't cover their costs. But if Watchtower go after them, it can destroy their lives.
Indeed.
So I find it very, very unfair.
Very, very true. Now, Jason, it's great to have you on the show. You and I have an interesting thing in common in that we've both received cease and desist letters from Watchtower's legal department in Paterson. Mine was signed, it seems, by Phil Brumley. I don't know who signed yours, but what was your reaction on receiving this letter?
I wasn't a bit surprised, to be honest. I was wondering when it would arrive. I'm surprised it took so long. Avoid JW was created in October 2014. And by January 2015, there was a lot of documents up on Avoid JW. And I was told by an awful lot of ex-JWs that, oh, you'll get a cease and desist. I says, well, if I do, I'll worry about it then. And so it took 3 years, over 3 years before I got that cease and desist. So when I did get it, I was kind of shocked by the wording. The wording was really harsh. But at the time, it did give me a scare. until I went to it with my solicitor. My solicitor just said, well, you're not signing that. He just looked at it and laughed at it. He says, he's only legal counsel, don't worry about him. He says he's going to have to do a lot more than that to get to for him to do anything. First of all, he has to prove it. All he's done is issued a number of subpoenas to a bunch of companies to take down documents. But he says he hasn't shown categorically how that information is directly connected to you. And I said, yeah, I said, because when I went through, because I think what's different to my C&D and your C&D, Lloyd, is that in mine, they wanted me to sign a document, basically signing my life away, signing my life to the Southern District of New York, the Court of Southern District of New York, and to basically not touch anything related to Watchtower for 6 years. I don't know where the 6 years comes out of, and to do it within 10 days. And I was like, well, I can't even sign this even if I wanted to, because even looking at the document itself, there was a whole load of things there that I have no control over. So to sign it, I'm signing to say that I have control of things I don't physically have control of. And so to that, I was in a legal conundrum, because I couldn't, I couldn't.
Even if you wanted
damned if I do and damned if I couldn't.
Yeah, sure.
So just to clarify what Jason is saying there, and I'm just going to hold this up. I'm not going to put it up on screen, but this is a 2-page document that Watchtower themselves produced. They wrote Jason's statement, starting with, I, Jason Wynn, after being duly sworn, depose and say, and then they proceed to list 9 distinct items that they demanded that he comply with. So they wrote the letter for him and asked him to sign it. And it was, as Jason says, it was just crazy things that, that he couldn't do, or some things that he wasn't even responsible for, because they went after multiple different sources of data that they claimed were data that he was producing, or servers that he was responsible for. But I'm not going to read all of this, or maybe Jason, you can comment on it, but immediately cease and desist displaying and disseminating intellectual property belonging to Watchtower or legal entities cooperating with Watchtower. See Schedule C with a whole list. And
I had a Schedule A, I didn't have a Schedule C.
This was a long one. And refrain from using such works on any website and any social media sites, including but not limited to Dropbox, Facebook, YouTube, Tumblr, LinkedIn, Twitter, Vimeo, vid.me, RUtube, and any other Google service. That was just item 1 right there. Immediately disable access to Watchtower's copyright works available at voidjw.org, etc., and other places. Immediately remove any of Watchtower's trademarks available at VoidJW and other places. Remove, delete, or destroy any data stored which provides access to Watchtower's intellectual property at my own cost for a period of 72 months from the date of this undertaking. That's the years Jason was talking about. Provide a witness statement endorsed with a statement of truth to confirm that I have complied with the undertakings above within 10 days of the date of this undertaking. Not cause, enable, permit, assist any other person committing the acts described in these undertakings. So he can't help anyone share leaks.
And Jason, am I right in saying that the understanding here was that you do all of these things, or we're going to, as I was saying earlier with Kim, create a legal nightmare for you that could potentially bankrupt you? Was that the situation they were putting you in?
That's exactly it. But looking at it in hindsight, I think what Philip was doing was he was thinking, right, he said to the governing body, look, I'll deal with this guy. It's going to be, I'll have a closed and shut in just a harsh, strongly worded letter, and that'll be the end of him. And then we'll get all these documents down off the internet. I don't think he really considered who he's dealing with. But, I've been looking at the psychology of these lawyers and why are they doing this? And, once you get into the psychology, you kind of understand how they operate. So we're essentially talking about four lawyers. There's Philip Brumley himself. There's Paul Polidoro. There's Mario Moreno. And there was another guy who was one of the first people who his name Stephen Simonis. And Stephen Simonis is the son of Gerald F. Simonis. Now, I don't know if you know who he is, but if you open up any magazine and you look at the very bottom, just on the inside, Gerald F. Simonis is the accountant for Watchtower. So Stephen Simonis is his son, and he worked for a third party, an outside company that obviously does work for Watchtower. So there's these four lawyers, but why would they think that they could achieve anything here? Well, it all goes back to the very beginning, right back to 1918, believe it or not. So in 1918, you'll remember that the members of the governing body and others were put into prison, and then they were given sentences of 10 years and 20 years for 4 different activities over. So some were getting 40 years and some were getting 80 years. But what's happened is they managed to get out of the court, and over the years, from then up until the present time, they've won so many cases. But I want to point you onto one thing. Philip Brumley did a talk in 1991 entitled Hailed Before Kings. And in it, he gloated about how they've won all these cases, and that he talked about Olin Moyle and others, and who had the Stratton case and a bunch of others that they had won. I think Paul Polidoro.
Well, they lost against Olin Moyle. Oh, you mean when Olin Moyle was representing them?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Yes, exactly. So their mindset is that they've won all these cases, and through being successful through Supreme Court cases, Jehovah's on their side. But there was one key thing that Philip Brumley brought up in that court, and I just want to quote it for you. And he says, "We have never lost a case against an apostate. The evil slave will not be able to beat the faithful slave to that degree." So that's the mindset we're dealing with. They see us as the evil slave and the governing body as the faithful and discreet slave, and they will always win against us.
So they, even though they're making demands, and we'll go into my letter shortly, even though they're making just outrageously silly demands that don't make any sense and that aren't legally defensible, their mindset is Jehovah is on our side. So a switch is gonna flick in Jason's head, or a switch is gonna flick in Lloyd's head, and he will just comply because this is what Jehovah wants. That's what you think?
Exactly.
Interesting.
Well, to show how threatening that language is, in Jason's letter, they said at the end of that letter, they said, "If it is the remedy we are obligated to pursue, we will seek monetary damages and compensation to the fullest extent of the law. These damages may include statutory penalties, and reimbursement of any costs we incur, including Watchtower's attorney's fees. We will also make every effort to legally enjoin you from further misappropriation under penalty of additional damages. This letter is not a complete statement of Watchtower's rights in connection with this matter. Watchtower reserves its rights with respect to the infringement of its intellectual property rights by you and all contributors to avoid jw.org and the other servers mentioned. Should you determine to allow this matter to go to court, you have your solicitor contact my office at the above address. Signed lovingly, Philip Brumley."
Were you going to say something, Kim?
Yeah, no, I was just actually what John just said then in respect of the continuation of the threat, that if you wish to continue, we will pursue intellectual property. It just goes on with what I was going to say about what Jason said. Yes, it's psychological. They absolutely believe that they're going to win, but it's a very, very standard legal tactic that we're going to treat you as if you're a lesser human being. You're ignorant, you don't know, so we'll just simply send you off a very, very seriously worded letter with a lot of open-ended, ambiguous threat. Anybody that works in the legal field will know that obtaining costs in any jurisdiction is not just as simple as we will go for costs and get them. There are legal issues in respect of gaining costs through proceedings, but the ordinary person doesn't know that. So they, like Jason said, they don't know who they've spoken to. They don't know who they're dealing with. They don't realise that ex-JWs learn that the world does not revolve around the organisation, and they do seek legal advice, and they're not scared because of that reality.
Yeah, they're not reckoning on us having critical thinking skills, it seems.
No.
But Kova, am I the only one who's noticing a pattern here? Because we seem to have had, particularly in the Montana case and in other cases, on full display, just shocking ineptitude by Watchtower's legal department. And am I right in saying that, you know, we're seeing something similar here? Just an incredible naivety in thinking that they can just push people around.
Yeah, you get the sense very much of an organization which is convinced it has God on their side, so it doesn't have to do much research, which if you actually compare, take the Montana case, for example, and we've documented that here. On the one hand, you had an incredibly professional and detailed prosecution that was presented by the plaintiff, by the abuse victims' lawyers, and then you compare that with the kind of the amateurish presentation of the Watchtower lawyer, who basically apparently just like whipped out a board and started drawing up, you know, random imagery.
Fish analogy,
yeah, and was very, very unimpressive. And this appears to replicate throughout all of the abuse cases that we've covered recently. You get the impression of people who are so convinced that that Jehovah God is going to intercede and make things right, that they don't really need to do much hard work, or they don't need to trouble themselves to be meticulous and professional. And it also comes through in the arrogance. I mean, to a certain degree, if you believe that you are God's one chosen organization and that you're fighting evil people who God is going to sweep aside for you, you will probably end up this kind of belligerent, swaggering individual. Now, what I'm really curious about is what Jason said. They gave that talk, I think Philip Brumley gave that talk back in the 90s. Since then, as far as I can see, Watchtower has been absolutely massacred in court case after court case. So, either Jehovah is asleep on the job, or maybe they need to start, reevaluating. I'd be fascinating to see if Brumley would make that speech now, because, Watchtower just seems to get routinely shot to bits in the courtroom.
Well, it was inaccurate when he gave it, because I think it was in 1939 that they lost to Olin Moyle, because when Olin Moyle left the organization, he was actually disfellowshipped directly by Rutherford. This was before there was disfellowshipping, but you could be disfellowshipped by the president. So Olin Moyle was disfellowshipped by the president because he'd written a letter detailing all of the abuse and all of the corruption that was going on at Bethel. And they tried suing him for libel, and they lost. So I think Brumley is guilty of the same old Watchtower trick of rewriting history there.
Well, it's definitely a delusion. And I think we've talked about this when we discussed the Montana case. Less than a month after Montana, I was in New York for a special event, and I ran into Phil Brumley after he had given this stirring talk about how important Watchtower's victories in the Supreme Court were and how they affected the entire world, because other Supreme Courts follow suit with the United States rulings.
Sorry, and the fact that you did run into him and had a conversation with him without him having a clue who you were and divulging a bunch of information, again, serves to underline just how inept this legal department is.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose, most lawyers don't divulge anything that they, feel is confidential. They want to hear information from you. They don't want, it's a one-way street with most attorneys, especially when they're talking to journalists. And that's something I learned from the very beginning working the Fessler case was, I had a lot of information, but the attorneys were very careful to not reveal information that they shouldn't reveal to a journalist or a blogger or anyone. So in the case of Brumley, though, when I ran into him, I asked him about the Montana case, and he really went off on that case. It was actually much like, I don't think I've discussed this on the show before, but after the Australian Royal Commission, I picked up the phone and called Australia and asked for their lead attorney, Vincent Toole. And they put me through to Vincent Toole. They call him Vin. They put me through to him immediately. And I talked to him for an hour about the Australian Royal Commission. And he did the same thing Brumley did, was he went off because he felt he could trust me, that, it was true that I was a baptized witness and I didn't lie about that. But he went off and said all of these things, and that's for another day to discuss what Vincent Toole said. But when I spoke to Brumley in New York, it is I don't know how smart this guy is. He was trained by Watchtower. He was sent to law school by Watchtower to be their guy, to be their in-house attorney, and to oversee the legal department. So when I asked him about Montana, he said, oh, no, the judge broke the law in that case, and they should have applied clergy privilege. And we're not going to go into all of that right now because it's a different topic, but it was so bizarre to me that he had this mindset that just didn't understand the plaintiff's case and why Watchtower lost that case. He said, we're going to appeal. And he said to me, you know, that child abuse cases are a lightning rod and that you can't win those cases. And in many cases, because the public sees you as guilty. And when the public sees you as guilty, then, you know, he said to me that they're going to fight it. And if they feel like they're losing it, then they're just going to settle. And he told me that they're going to settle the case if they don't get what they want through their appeal process, which is just bizarre to me, you know, that he's admitting that they're just going to write a check, just like they've done in most of the other cases that have not gone to trial.
More than 35 million.
Yeah, I mean, who knows what it's going to end up being, Lloyd, but, you know, they're writing checks for millions of dollars. You know, I went to trial with Fessler and with Montana, and Fessler, we had 4 days of trial, and Watchtower finally said, we're done. You know, we're just going to write a check because this is going very poorly. And Fessler could have been a $35 million judgment because originally they had asked for $2 million, and Watchtower said, we'll give you $100,000. And Stephanie Fessler said, no way, we're going to court. You know, she'd rather lose and get nothing than to get a measly $100,000. And that's what she did. And Watchtower collapsed and they wrote a check. So I'm sure it was a big number. But yeah, the fact is that, you know, Brumley and his associates, I think what Jason was saying was right. You know, there's more to this, and they're very delusional in their thinking. They're defending the indefensible.
Can I just give 2 points on that now? Because Brumley, one of the other things that he said is that they litigate to give a witness. He said that in his talk in 1991. He says, we litigate so we can give a witness. He says, because, you know, these judges and barristers and other personnel in court, we don't get to go to them, knock on their doors door to door, because they have butlers and maids. But when we can litigate and we have a brief, they read the brief and it's full of scriptures. So this is the mindset you're working
with. That's working out well for them, isn't it?
Oh well, yeah. How many judges and solicitors and barristers have become Jehovah's Witnesses from reading a Jehovah's Witness brief? All they're reading is complete, utter propaganda and twisting of truth. I mean, all of us that have read any of the materials relating to the court cases, we can see how much they twist. I mean, Mark, you've been in court in relation to child abuse, and you've seen the likes of, is it Jefferson? Of how he's twisted things, and then you were able to ask the jury, and the jury said, oh, he's a funny man, the way he can just twist his words around.
The jury called him a monkey wrench. The jury called him a monkey wrench and said he was there to throw a wrench into it and confuse everything. And they were on the side of the plaintiff from the moment that trial started.
Mark, I'm wondering if it would be possible for you to bring up my cease and desist letter, because this is something that I've been, again, sitting on for a while now. And just to briefly explain the logic in not sharing it earlier with my viewers, I'm going to also kind of share a little bit of what I wrote back to Watchtower, but suffice to say, I wanted to keep my cards close to my chest in case Watchtower did come for me and I needed to, you know, alert the media to what was happening. It's now over a year since I sent my reply. I've not heard anything. But now that I'm seeing all of these, now that Mark's uncovered this information about subpoenas, and I'm seeing an increasingly litigious organization emerging, I just feel, especially with Jason revealing his letter, it's just worthwhile, I think, being open and transparent on this. So you can see there, this is the top of the first page. And this letter was sent to me digitally in an email from Watchtower's legal department and by courier. I think it might have been UPS. I'm not entirely sure which company it was, but I actually got a letter I needed to sign for. And you can see there, Mr. Evans, I represent Watchtower Bible and Tract Society of Pennsylvania. It has come to our attention that you, in your name and under pseudonyms such as John Cedars, are reproducing and distributing Watchtower's intellectual property on the following websites: rutube.ru, JW Survey, and YouTube. A list of some of the works owned by Watchtower that are currently being infringed on these websites is attached as Schedule A. I'll come to Schedule A later, but if we can move on to the next, the next page, the next part of the letter. So I'm not sure whether it's fully showing there, Mark, on the screen share.
Okay, are we missing?
It's just over, at least on mine. It might be okay for the viewers, but on mine it's overlapping a little bit with the with people's. That's better. Yeah, that's much better. Thank you. So just so I can read it. So they also make some strange argumentation about trademarks and arguing that not just the JW.org logo, but it seems to suggest the JW trademark, as though just using the words JW is a trademark. I don't know whether this came up on your letter, Jason.
Yes, it did.
It did. So they were basically arguing that I'm not allowed to use the letters JW without breaching a trademark, which I just laughed at, quite frankly.
Yeah, which to you, Lloyd, your initials are LC, but my initials are JW, so I can't use the term JW with Jehovah's Witnesses when my
disenfranchised from your own initials, it seems. So yeah, they go on about trademarks, and then they say Watchtower has spent a great deal of time and effort developing its intellectual property. Watchtower demands that you provide written confirmation that all infringing content has been removed within 10 days of the date of this letter. If such confirmation is not received within 10 days, Watchtower will take this matter to court. If we are obligated to take this matter to court to stop the infringement, we will seek monetary damages and compensation to the fullest extent of the law. Now, it's easy to shrug off that kind of language. But when you are a person of modest means, living in the middle of nowhere with your wife and child, and don't have, tens of thousands to spend on anything really, let alone hiring a lawyer, this sort of language can be very unnerving. And I know, without wanting to speak for Deanna too much, I know this sort of thing affected her. This was like, oh, this is getting serious now. And it was only when I kind of really spent some time reading the letter and looking at Schedule A, which we'll come to shortly, that I realized that there wasn't really anything to worry about, because what Watchtower's demands were just completely nonsensical. But even so, it did rattle me. If we just go to the next slide there, Mark. So this was the end of the letter. And we've already heard from Jason's letter, that same paragraph. These penalties may include statutory damages, attorney's fees, and reimbursement of any costs. Kim made the excellent point that no lawyer is in any position to say that they will be entitled to costs. That's something that needs to be deliberated independently. It says, this letter is not a complete statement of Watchtower's rights in connection with this matter. Watchtower reserves its rights with respect to the infringement of its intellectual property rights by you and all contributors to JW Survey, which kind of, ties in the JW Survey team as well. Additionally, Watchtower reserves its rights with respect to infringement on all social media platforms with which you are affiliated, including the RooTube account, and the YouTube account. Should you determine to allow this matter to go to court, please have your attorney contact my office at the above address. Sincerely, Philip Brumley. I can't figure out, by the way, just on a lighter note, whether it says Philip Brumley by Anton or whether that says something else, as though it's not really him signing it. Because I'd really like that to be an authentic Philip Brumley signature, but I'm not entirely sure.
It's not. That's somebody's prepared that for him.
Oh, that's a shame.
Yeah, sorry to disappoint you.
At the very least, I'd expect an authentic Philip Brumley signature.
Is that common in legal circles then, that you don't necessarily sign your own letters?
Absolutely, very, very, very common. And that's why he said by, and quite often someone will have a double signature or they'll have just a word, and so that they can identify that they had Philip Brumley's a permission to sign on their behalf.
Okay. Oh, well. Anyway, perhaps just before we go to Schedule A, I should just explain that when it's talking about RooTube, I did have an account on RooTube, which is like the Russian equivalent of YouTube, where I would share any kind of videos that were leaked to me that didn't have commentary. So it was cheeky of me to do that, but I just figured, hey, it's important that this material gets out there. And so when they're talking about RooTube, they're talking about those kind of videos that were just put up on the internet without any commentary, and which you could argue were in breach of copyright. So just to explain, now if we go to Schedule A, and you'll notice at the bottom of the list there, this is one of the things that they wanted me to remove, which is why I was talking about it earlier, Pillowgate the rebuttal. In fact, that is one of only 2 YouTube videos, the other being the leaked 2018 convention videos, which I put out earlier than they were supposed to, earlier than the convention season. But yeah, they wanted me to remove the leaked convention videos, and they wanted me to remove Pillowgate the rebuttal. Now, sorry, go on.
Yeah, it's interesting, Lloyd, that you mentioned this. And I was thinking about, since this happened beginning in 2017, one of the things that we saw, and you've talked about this in many of your videos, that there was a global downsizing of many of the branches. One of the explanations that Watchtower gave, which is partly true, is that they are using online resources and remote translation offices, and they're using the internet and their new ability, or their new internal structure. So they have this worldwide global secure network where they can all communicate with each other. Some of it is through jw.org, where they can access documents and send each other things without using regular email, which, by the way, comes very handy in legal cases, because they have their own internal system and they can delete whatever they want to delete without it being known. And places like, Gmail can't be subpoenaed for documents because it's not anywhere online. It's within their internal structure. But they also have this very sophisticated network of individuals who are remote workers. And what that means is that you might have someone in Peru, someone in Estonia, someone in Russia. So you've got this large group of people who are specialists in certain areas, like video editing, for example. And Watchtower will release documents to be worked on. They might film them in New York, but then they will work on editing down in Peru or Brazil or somewhere else. And so a lot of people have remote access. It's secure, but it's remote access to these files. So they've got a big problem now, is that it's not just that these leaks are coming from Brooklyn, or which used to be Brooklyn, but they're not just coming from, they're coming from anywhere in the world.
They have a global workforce, including people, like you say, in the middle of nowhere,
and that's
are responsible for translating a video into some language, and they have access to it. And because they might be in a position where they're starting to wake up, they give us information. But just going back to what I was saying about RooTube. So I was in this situation where I was being asked to take down RooTube videos, basically, and I was being asked to take down 2 YouTube videos, which were actually within copyright fair use laws, because both of the YouTube videos had my commentary on them, which means I get to criticize them, basically. There were some other requirements as well in the letter to do with the logo appearing on JW Survey, which I figured out was a little lapel badge that showed in the header image that had the jw.org logo on. So I changed the header image of JW Survey. That was one thing off the list. I also agreed to, I actually, rather than taking down those individual RooTube videos, I removed my RooTube account, went above and beyond to kind of make them happy. But I absolutely drew the line on the YouTube videos. And what I'm now going to do, if we can just come out of that now, Mark, for some reason it's
yeah, let's
dominating my screen.
There we go.
That's better, thank you. I'm just going to read a little bit of my reply. I'm not going to read all of it. So I said, there are, however, some requests in your letter with which I cannot comply because I do not consider these to refer to any violation of the law on my part. Specifically, I do not accept that simply by using the term JW in relation to the tenets of Jehovah's Witnesses, I am in violation of any trademark, nor do I accept that my work on the John Cedars YouTube channel infringes any copyright. I am well within my rights to show Watchtower's intellectual property for the purpose of criticism and parody under the fair use provisions of copyright law. I cannot adequately comment on Watchtower materials if I am unable to show them, especially in the case of such outrageous materials as the Pillowgate videos, which must be seen to be believed. Indeed, I note the Pillowgate videos have already appeared on the Joe McHale show on Netflix, which leads me to wonder whether Mr. McHale and or Netflix can expect to similarly receive a cease and desist letter from your office, or are you only in the habit of pursuing copyright claims against former members? For these reasons, I will not be removing the final 2 items on Schedule A of your letter. And I went on to say, as General Counsel to Watchtower, you will be aware of the magnificent work of your forebears. This goes to what you were saying earlier, Jason. The likes of Hayden Covington and Olin Moyle in securing rights to free speech, not just for Jehovah's Witnesses, but for all. It would be extremely regrettable if the current incumbent of their office were to be seen besmirching this proud legacy by aggressively trying to stifle free speech through a misapplication of the law. And then I quoted Psalm 94, verse 20. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but that was the gist of it. I kind of drew the line at the YouTube videos, and I haven't heard anything since. But I think what troubles me most, I mean, I can deal with this. I feel as though even in the worst case scenario, if they were to come for me, I have enough people who care about my work to maybe mount some sort of defense. But what really troubles me, Mark, is when you showed me, and maybe you can bring it up on the screen again, that list of subpoenas, because that now we're going into the realms of bullying and aggressively going after individuals to try to find out who they are. And that's what I find most disturbing.
Yeah, I'd like to discuss a few of these here, and we don't have time to go into every single one of them, but there's a few key points I'd like to bring up, and maybe what I'll do is when the time is right, I will bring up an actual subpoena. So, you know, I don't want to repeat myself too many times, but what's going on is that Philip Brumley and Moreno and Polidoro and their legal team are seeing, okay, here we have a problem with a website where an individual who's posting online. Watchtower is scouring the internet. I mean, they are going deep into Facebook pages and into Reddit, which is, by the way, the Reddit XJW group just recently got a subpoena. To Reddit in California. Yes, and we could discuss that as well. That's on the list. I believe it's on the list. So
can we see that? Because I know there'll be lots of people from that subreddit who are watching this.
Absolutely, yes. So let me scroll down, and we'll get to that in just a moment. Okay. So we've got all of these. So what Watchtower is scouring the internet, including Reddit, Google, YouTube. You know, wherever they find a document, they say, they look at it first, and to your point earlier, that they're going after ex-Jehovah's Witnesses who they believe are either apostates or leakers. And for the record, they are doing it selectively, and they actually have referred to a court case that is the foundation for them doing it selectively. In other words, they're saying that they can't just be held to going after every single person who violates their copyright, because
like
that's
Joe McHale.
Yeah, well, yes, and other witnesses, because thousands and thousands of witnesses post Watchtower pictures every single day. If you follow any Instagram post, you've got tons of it. It's all being shared by witnesses. So they're not going after those people. They're going after the people that they suspect are either ex-witnesses or apostates or leakers or people they want to deal with. So it started back, as you mentioned, around early 2017 with the leak of Pillowgate and the July broadcasting episode that came out early. And as you notice at the top of this list, you have Tom Durbridge and others. I mean, there was a litany of names that they went after on one particular subpoena against Google, which was an attack on Avoid JW, because these documents were hosted all over the place by numerous names, including Jehovah Mageddon and Tom Durbridge and others.
Are these made up names by any chance?
So yeah, I mean, the reality is that most of these people are not using their real names, because they automatically know if they post something from Watchtower, they're going to be subject to being disfellowshipped or shunned, or even having a legal case carried out against them. So then we have another one that I named here. This was to GoDaddy. So originally, when Jason, who no longer runs Avoid JW, but started the Avoid JW site, was hosting it on GoDaddy. So here's the thing: GoDaddy is located in the United States, so there was jurisdiction for Watchtower to go to Arizona, which is where GoDaddy is located. That's a hosting provider. They've issued the subpoena, and they were forced to turn over his information, which is why he got the threatening letter. Now, in the case of JW Survey, they didn't have to issue a subpoena to identify the infringer on JW Survey, because they knew who John Cedars was. They knew your identity and got your address, and they sent you that letter. So then that's why we see the C&D, cease and desist letters were sent February 23rd and February 27th. Of 2018.
By the way, I will just mention this. It's not easy to get my address. I have a business address, and I'm grateful in a way that it didn't go to the business address for reasons I won't go into, and it instead went to my actual address so that I could respond to it quickly. But it isn't easy to get hold of my actual address, and they managed to do it. So they did some digging. It wasn't just a case of, making clicks on Google. They really did some digging to find my home address.
Yeah, so the thing to keep in mind is that Watchtower is able to go after most of these people and most of these companies because the vast majority of social media platforms are hosted in the United States. So take Google and YouTube, they own each other. They're the same company. Then you have GoDaddy, that's in Arizona. Then you have DigitalOcean, that's a hosting provider in New York. Microsoft is in Washington. Lots of files were hosted on Microsoft. Instagram, of course, is owned by Facebook. So Facebook and Instagram are both the same, and I believe their primary address is California. So all of these are United States based, so it's very easy for Brumley and his associates to go after and get that information pulled down. So what that means is that new strategies have been implemented by whoever these leakers are, and now they're going to foreign-based accounts, in faraway countries, whether it's Russia or even Croatia or China or Switzerland, and they are hosting documents in secret places that actually, in many of these places, are not subject to DMCA law. There's several countries that legally can ignore DMCA takedown notices, and they're trying to change those laws, but right now there's nothing Watchtower can do about it. So they're hosting in these foreign countries, And so, you know, whoever it was that took over Void JW has got files hosted through Faith Leaks, and these are some faraway location that's not subject to DMCA law. And Watchtower is really, really angry about that, because all the private and sensitive documents that are there. And I might also add that, look, these are people doing this for honest reasons. These are people doing it. I wanted to ask Jason this earlier when you were talking about this, and then we'll come back to the spreadsheet. But look, when you started Avoid JW, Jason, you know, did you do this to maliciously go after and hurt JWs? Why did you do this?
Well, the reason I did it was because I was told by my brother that Jehovah's Witnesses have secrets. Now, he's a non-JW, and I said, no, yeah, that's all apostate lies. He said, Jason, if it's apostate lies, you can go and have a look, and you'll know if it's lies. So I went and looked, and I got very angry, because what I discovered was they do have a lot of secrets, and that they do have this elder manual. And I said, this can't be going on. We can't have secrets from ourselves. If we've got secrets from ourselves, that's just, you've become this devious organization. So I decided, well, you know what? There's going to be no more secrets, because even in the Bible, and I quote that that verse is beside my name, Mark 4:22, which is anything secret will become revealed. And that's why Avoid JW was founded, was to put all these secrets out into the public, so that every Jehovah's Witness and non-Jehovah's Witness, because there shouldn't be any secrets in God's organization, can see them all, and that we can be completely and utterly transparent. It's not to hurt the organization. The organization, if it's a good, clean organization, shouldn't have any secrets. Not a single secret. What should they have any secrets? The whole Bible was given to us. If it's God's word and given to us, it doesn't have any secrets, because if it had any secrets, it wouldn't have been written into it. So you can't say that God had any secrets. There is no secrets. Well, for us to know and understand about life and how to live, shouldn't be any secrets, and that's the whole reason behind it. And what really annoys me about Philip Brumley is, right, it's the likes of him that creates their legal policies, and he has a policy dated November 6, 2014, just before this new elder manual came in. This was the policy on legal matters, and at the beginning they said that the Satan's world has become very litigious. And then they quote 2 Timothy chapter 3 verses 2-4, and in there it says, for men will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boastful, haughty, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, disloyal. But this is the verse that I find extremely ironic. It's verse 3, and it says, having no natural affection, not open to any agreement, slanderers, without self-control, fierce, without love of goodness. Now, if you think about it, Brumley and co. have no natural affection, and no affection at all for anyone, for the reasons behind. Even Philip Brumley in his 1991 talk, he said that he talked about a child custody case where they had a female lawyer go and do research on an apostate so that they could win a case against him, so that the parent, the JW parent, would get custody of the child. And so they did their research on the apostate that was going to help this non-JW parent. And when they went into court with it, they had actually had enough information just to show him up as an idiot, and he was gloating about that. But the point was that female lawyer went and researched on that man. But what these lawyers aren't doing is researching on us. They just have no natural affection and aren't open to any agreement. Maybe there's a reason why we exist, and maybe we can actually disappear if they were open to any agreement. But no, they'd rather call us slanderers, and then they're going around the internet looking for people and trying to disfellowship them, showing that they have no natural affection, and they're doing it without self-control and fiercely and without any love of goodness. So that verse in 2 Timothy chapter 3 verses 3 is the Watchtower's legal department, and it really boils my blood. And I don't believe that they're doing anything righteous. And if there is a God, and if Jehovah is righteous, he won't let these men win.
If I could just say, actually, Jason, I'm just anxious to kind of move things along because we've been on for over an hour now, but I just want to add that I'm sure I speak for many watching this episode in saying that Avoid JW has been a fantastic resource. All it does is provide Watchtower, quote unquote, spiritual food that is otherwise impossible to get hold of due to the organization's lack of transparency. I've personally found it to be an extremely helpful resource in writing The Reluctant Apostate, in researching for videos, etc. And I can't thank you enough for creating that resource.
Thank you.
And that was one of the points I wanted to get with Jason too, is that we've discussed this many times, that if it were not for the shunning policy and what happened to your family as a result of you at a young age deciding, you were baptized, but you decided you wanted to have a girlfriend, you were disfellowshipped for having a girlfriend, and your mom won't speak to you, and other family members won't speak to you. And so what I really want people to understand is that the people that are doing these things, like you started that website, the reason was none of this would be going on if it weren't for the fact that shunning and the destruction of families has instigated an emotional and an angered response from people that want their families back. That's why these leakers and these websites and all of this pops up, because they want their families back. They don't care what Jehovah's Witnesses believe. They can believe in the paradise earth, and they can believe in everything that they want to believe about God and the New World Translation and their interpretation of it. But stop breaking up families, or you're going to continue to have these people that are coming forth that are elders and circuit overseers and pioneers and people that are leaking documents left and right, and they're never, ever going to stem the tide of this.
Indeed. If it's okay. Sorry, go on, Kim.
I was just going to say, in response to what Jason and Mark just said then, I completely agree with both of you. I think, though, you'll see the attitude by, obviously Jeffrey Jackson and others at the Australian Royal Commission is a very clear indicator that they have no intention of removing themselves from their very righteous position in respect of those sorts of doctrines. They just were not even interested in answering the questions.
Indeed. Now, what I'd like to do is come back to all of you for some concluding thoughts. And what I would ask as well is, because this is a complicated subject, and we've probably bitten off more than we can chew in trying to do it justice. But certainly, Mark and Jason, if there's anything that we've missed or any key points that the audience needs to know about, if you could incorporate those into your concluding comments, I would be very grateful. But before we go to our concluding thoughts, it's that time when to lighten the mood, we need to behold a thing of beauty. Few people truly understand the meaning of hearing the news read in a competent, assured, mildly sexy way. But everyone is going to understand that once they have heard Covert Fade introduces the news.
And cue music. Okay,
we need a jingle.
Yeah, every newsreader needs a jingle. It's actually much more about the jingle than the actual news. It's not a lot of people realize this, but the jingle is really what it's all about.
True.
Yeah, so this is it's kind of ironic because the last Watchtower in Focus we had, we were sort of saying we didn't actually do this because we couldn't really find anything that we wanted to drill down into. Somebody turned on the news fire hose.
Indeed.
Because this time we've got quite a few. So I'm going to go through them at a relatively brisk pace, but hopefully I'll give everyone enough details. And I also want to say there is actually more stuff I wanted to cover, but we're just not going to have time. So here are the highlights. So things have been really busy in the media in Europe, and there's some really interesting stuff here. I'm going to start off in Spain. Now, in Spain, a article has come out in the, I'm just going to get on my, I've got 100 different tabs open at the moment, so you'll have to bear with me. So an article has come out in the Redacción Médica, I'm sorry, my Spanish accent is dreadful, which basically is announcing that the Jehovah's Witness organization in Spain has been fined 10,000 euros for collecting data from medical staff and from patients without prior authorization. Essentially what's happened was the hospital liaison committee have gone around to all hospitals trying to sort of reach out to medical staff and build a database of staff who were willing to perform non-blood surgeries. But what they actually did is they basically essentially grabbed too much data that they weren't entitled to under data protection law. And so that's the first mistake they made. The second mistake they made is that they claimed when the Data Protection Agency apparently chased the branch about this, the branch apparently told them that the database had been destroyed, which was a lie, because it was later found out the database was not destroyed. So one, you could almost say Watchtower didn't understand it, had made a mistake. You could almost
that a lie was told by Watchtower officials. Surely
yeah,
not.
I know. I am stunned. My jaw is agape at the unusualness of this. Yeah,
That's just an abomination, isn't it? Wow.
Who'd have thunk it?
Yeah.
So there you have it. You could almost write the first mistake off as incompetence, but then to lie about it really kind of plays their hand as to what their attitude actually is toward this. Now, that article, again, if you actually go to Avoid JW, most of the articles I'm going to discuss are either you can find English translations on Avoid JW or on Reddit, on the XJW Reddit. Keeping with the Spanish theme, so this isn't the only problem they've had in Spain. This is one of a number of issues that another article entitled Enter the Dark World of Jehovah's Witnesses, which was a general expose of witness problems, went into in Spain. They talk about the way the witnesses treat women. They talk about shunning. They talk about child abuse, the whole shebang. They have experiences of various XJWs who have suffered from this. So we have there Spain, the two major media exposes. Okay, now we're moving to Italy. So in Italy, there's been another major media story. And I just want to say with Spain, going back there, remember that Watchtower GDPR law has come into force in the European Union. Watchtower thinks it's in compliance, and we covered this on a previous Watchtower in Focus. This is an example of how Watchtower doesn't understand data protection law. And I think this is just the first example of what they are going to be in for a world of hurt in the next few years, I think, with data protection in the EU. In the EU, if you violate GDPR, I think they can take up to like 20% of your gross income. So watch this space. So moving on to Italy. In Italy, an article's come out about a Jehovah's Witness woman, and I'm just going to get the reference up. A Jehovah's Witness lady who who accepted a blood transfusion, and as a result, she has been disfellowshipped and shunned.
Oh, really?
Yes. So basically what happens is initially she rejected the transfusions, but then complications in her case, the doctors basically explained, like, you are risking your life. So she accepted the transfusion. Basically her three daughters, aged 30, 25 and 21, have abandoned her. And generally all of her family have walked away. Now, this is critical again, because when it comes to blood transfusions, this is something that the doctors and lawyers and everyone involved in these situations needs to understand. Jehovah's Witnesses are telling you they don't want blood transfusions, and many of them probably genuinely believe it. But the problem is also that if one of them secretly wants a transfusion, they know that if they accept it, it could cost them all of their family and their loved ones. And this
if there's any threats at all, if there are any consequences for failing to fall in line, then these people are under coercion, and it can't be considered to be their personal choice, can it?
Exactly. And this is, as we've said, this is what hospitals need to understand, is when that hospital liaison committee walks into the hospital and those elders are there, they're not just there to provide spiritual comfort, they're there to be spiritual enforcers. And this case really does highlight that. Again, you can find that on the XJW Reddit, and this appeared in the Naples Chronicle in Italy. Moving on to Denmark. Are you keeping up? I hope you're keeping up. This is giving you some example of how much stuff has happened.
We don't have like a moving map showing all these.
Yeah.
I'll have to fire our technical guy. But yeah.
You've given me ideas now. I demand a moving map and green M&Ms in my dressing room.
With the covert fade logo kind of hovering across the continent, definitely.
Exactly. Oh, yeah, I really want that now. So, yeah, moving on to Denmark. So, again, you can find translated versions of this both on the XJW Reddit and on Avoid JW. There's been a huge firestorm in the media in Denmark. Now, keeping in mind that a lot of Scandinavian countries appear to be waking up to the issue of the way Watchtower treats Jehovah's Witnesses and various issues to do with Jehovah's Witnesses. And Denmark appears to be the latest example. Apparently, this all started with a recording that was given to the press of a judicial committee. And in this judicial committee, there is an inactive woman she's an inactive JW, and she's undergoing trial for being accused of having premarital sex with her boyfriend. Now, I'd just like to call back that during the Royal Commission, Jeffrey Jackson tried to give the impression that you could just fade and not be subject to the rules of the organisation. Well, this is a cast iron example of why that wasn't true. And actually, as Angus Stewart actually pinned him down in the end and got him to admit, this woman's faded, but she still got dragged before a religious court. Now, what happened was that this woman, apparently, she was talking to another JW or a JW. This JW recorded what she said, where she apparently basically said she'd been sleeping with her boyfriend, and then gave that to the elders who used it to prosecute her. Now, thankfully, this woman was also, it just goes, recording is a two-edged sword. It can be used for good and evil. This woman was able to use recording for good. She was able to record her judicial committee, and she passed this on. And this has then blown up into this huge firestorm in the Netherlands. There have been articles about the Danish government, and some politicians have basically realized they have a parallel legal system operating in Denmark. That is, in this example, is dragging a woman into a closed room with 3 men and then interrogating her about sex.
And you've hit on something there, Covert, which I don't think enough governments understand. And just that wording, parallel legal system, it just shouldn't exist in any civilized democracy. They're figuring that out now in the Netherlands, and it sounds like they're starting to figure it out in Denmark.
Yeah.
How long will it take for countries like the UK and the United States and Canada and Australia to similarly understand that you just simply cannot have running in parallel with the law this other system that punishes people?
Exactly. I mean, there's 2 problems with it. One is that it punishes people for things which are not crimes and destroys lives. And 2, things that are crimes, like child abuse, this legal system can suck it into the JW legal system, but then that crime may never make it to the real legal system.
Indeed.
So there's, at the very minimum, there's 2 horrific problems with this. This snowballs again, because obviously all this is in the media, and not only about the judicial committees, about the shunning, about everything else. Well, the Dutch branch at first, the Danish branch at first says nothing, but then a local elder decides to go and give an unauthorized and total car crash interview to the media. You can find this on the XJW Reddit. It's a thing of beauty, because this elder's trying to justify shunning. He basically admits that he shuns his own daughter, but kind of implies that it isn't a big deal. And clearly, it's one of these examples of how Jehovah's Witnesses, when they're so indoctrinated, they don't realize how they sound to the rest of normal humanity when they say things like this. So that interview happens. And then, in what I can only assume is a desperate attempt at damage control, the branch puts forth a speaker for an interview. And the speaker, this JW spokesman, talks to the media and basically doesn't really make things much better. He kind of admits that, shunning exists, and he tries to put his best spin on everything. But it's, again, I think if you read that, he does not come off well. Now, this is still ongoing. So obviously Norway, we've seen, and I'll come on to Norway in a minute. Norway is moving on the issue of parallel legal systems, and so is Finland, and all of these different Scandinavian and European countries appear to have, in the last year and a half, gone, hang on, what's this then? So yeah, watch this space. Now, there's only 2 more things to cover in Covert Fade reads the news, so bear with me. The first is in Norway. There's been a headline article
We should,
that one.
rename this segment "Covert Fade Attempts to Pronounce Foreign Words."
Jason knows it.
More
Yeah.
accurate.
Pedro Venom.
There we go. Thank you. I was deliberately messing it up to give Jason. Yeah, thank you. This is a really good article where an XJW named Nana Maria talks about how the fear of demons and Armageddon in her childhood basically ruined her childhood, and talks about the psychological damage that did. Now, that's an experience that most XJWs are very aware of. You know, demons were something that terrified me when I was a kid. And so that's a really interesting article, and that's a series of ongoing exposure that's been going on for months in the Norwegian media. And it's interesting, what they're locking onto now is not just the really bad stuff like child abuse and shunning, but just also how like this, in some ways, you know, not as bad but still awful things like the way JWs terrorize their kids with the fear of demons and Armageddon. And coming on to, almost at the finish line, I'm sprinting, and I still didn't get to cover most of it. As we're aware, Reclaim Voices have done amazing work in the Netherlands. What they have achieved is astonishing, and they have got Watchtower on the run in a way I've rarely seen before. One of the things they've been able to do, working with abuse survivors and with a number of people in the media, with a number of politicians, is get an independent investigation set up into Watchtower's child abuse policies. And the official website for that organization has now gone live. The website is... you know, I had the link and I can't find it.
Reclaimvoices.org, isn't it? Is it recent, the website? I've been on it loads.
No, it's not reclaimvoices.org. It's a different one.
A new website.
This is the university, because they've got a university and a number of professors who are in. If you Google it, but that website is now live. So maybe, I don't know, maybe
a link will be
in
the description, viewers.
Yeah. But that's up, and now how this investigation will turn out, I have no idea. I think all of us are secretly hoping for another royal commission. Realistically, this investigation isn't going to have those resources, so I think we shouldn't set the bar too high. But at the same time, this is very exciting to watch.
Although the difference here is that it's just purely for Jehovah's Witnesses. It's not interested in any other institutions. So
that's true.
The focus is purely on the organization.
That is true. So yeah, it's going to be fascinating to watch this unfold. And again, that goes to show you what activists, what brave abuse survivors, what members of the media and politicians can accomplish if they all get together and work on this problem. So that brings us to the end of Covert Fade Introduces the News.
And tries to pronounce foreign words. Thank you very much.
Offends half of Europe as he mutilates their language.
Well, thank you very much for that. And just to add on to that, an item on Reclaim Voices, just a quick update on the documentary. I am nearing the end of getting that edited, and look out for it. If not at the end of this month, then certainly within the first few days of March. It's very close to being finished, so look out for that. But yes, thank you very much indeed, Covert, for that rundown. And we must now come back to the issue at hand, which is the subpoena warfare and underhanded litigious antics of Watchtower in essentially trying to crush criticism and indeed crush transparency and people's access to the organization's own quote-unquote spiritual food. Jason, have you had any thoughts that you want to share with us by way of concluding remarks?
Yeah, just that a lot of ex-JWs are a little bit worried about these subpoenas. I've had a number of individuals that got issued these subpoenas from their relative ISPs, just worried that they get caught and that they would be disfellowshipped. Now, I've allayed a lot of their fears and they shouldn't be worrying too much. Now, what I would say is for anyone that is leaking documents, they've got to make sure that they're not a JW, or they're not afraid to be disfellowshipped, or they're not any of that fear. If you're going,
are we really at that stage now where you can't leak unless you're ready to?
No, not leak. I mean, leak it yourself. Don't be leaking it yourself. Look, there's a lot of other organizations. So
find someone else who can leak it on your behalf.
Exactly. You know, don't be doing it yourself. Doing it yourself is kind of spiritual suicide. But also, I don't think people need to be worried too much as well about the legal avenues that Watchtower can take, because even I'm going back to Philip Brumley again, and this is my last point, because that talk, and I will be providing that talk to people that don't have it on the 23rd of February, which was the anniversary of my C&D. And in that talk, he also said, it's 1991, and it was around the time of the Swaggart case. And he says, we now give away our literature so that no one can accuse Jehovah's Witnesses of making money. So he, in his own words, says, we give it away. Not that, that there's a copyright control of it. It's like we give it away. So for anyone else to be giving it away is okay, because it's just
doing their work for them.
So don't be afraid, is all I'd say. Last point.
Very, very wise. And Covert, what are your thoughts on what we've been discussing?
So I have some thoughts, and then I have a very quick question which can probably be answered in 30 seconds, but I think it's important to just clear up. So initially, you know, Jesus said, "Go therefore and spread my, you know, make disciples of all the nations, spread my word," unless they're talking about me in an unauthorized manner, in which case you can sue them for saying the things I said and that should be available to everybody, because apparently that makes sense.
That's not in my version of the Bible.
No, it's not in mine either.
Yeah.
Essentially, I kind of echo Jason's point in that, one, the stuff that's getting leaked, either they don't charge for, so it's not a monetary loss, or B, it's supposed to be an example of how a righteous organization works. So all Jehovah's Witnesses should know it anyway, and they should be shouting it from the rooftops. This is how we run our organization. So it makes, if you were to accept that this is God's organization, it would make no sense that they operate the way they do. I think it displays that where Watchtower's legal department comes in is often where you see kind of a nasty, thuggish side to the organization. And I think it's a side that many Jehovah's Witnesses would be horrified to see. You really do see the kind of the nasty behavior that you don't always see in other parts of the way the organization treats people when it comes to legal. And I think, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where this goes. I did have a question about Reddit, because I know we said there was a subpoena issue to Reddit, and
we've interested to tackle as well. People watching on Reddit who are probably genuinely concerned as to whether, you know, their information is at risk of being divulged to the organization. So
I can comment on that and then come back to my final comments, because that's sort of a separate issue, if you don't mind. So let me just do a quick screen share so people know what's going on with Reddit, because the moderators of the Reddit XJW group were very concerned over what was going on with this subpoena. By the way, it was issued just 1 month and 1 day. The subpoena was issued 1 month and 1 day ago from today. So basically, so what has happened was that someone posted, if you can all, can you see that on your screen?
Yeah.
I think we're doing a screen share. Okay, so this is a copy. This is the top portion of the Reddit subpoena issued. Now, this one's interesting because normally the Watchtower goes to the Southern District of New York, you know, Brumley or Polidoro, but they actually were so serious about this one that they got a license or a pro hoc vice request granted in California, because Reddit is located in California, their headquarters, so that they could go to California and get a judge in California. So this is the United States District Court for the Northern District of California, which is where Reddit is located. And it's case number 4:19 MC 80006 KAW, and KAW is the judge, the initials of the judge. So what had happened was someone posted a convention invitation, an innocuous convention invitation on Reddit, but the Watchtower legal department suspected this person to be an apostate who may be leaking other information. They've gotten a judge to issue a subpoena to Reddit, not to the group, but to Reddit itself, because, you know, they control all of the subreddits. And so what you're looking at here is, and we'll get this posted in various places, but what you're looking at is a copy of the actual link, which has been taken down, of this convention invitation that resulted in a subpoena. Why? Not because they just wanted it taken down, because they could do that with a DMCA. because Reddit is very compliant, and so are the XGW moderators. But they are trying to identify the infringer, in this case, a person by the name of ICH3B. And notice what it says. You are commanded to produce, at the time, date, and place set forth below, the following documents and electronically stored information or objects, and to permit inspection, copying, testing, or sampling of material, all identifying information, including subscriber registration information, the name and addresses, telephone numbers, any electronic email addresses associated with the infringing Reddit user displaying the name ICH3B, and any logs of internet protocol addresses. See, they're going after their IP addresses so that they can compare those to the other IP addresses they get from the 40 or more other subpoenas that they have obtained.
I just want to confirm then, so you're only, because I think a lot of people on Reddit are anonymous and they'd be worried that Watchtower could just force Reddit to turn over information. But what we're saying is you're only necessarily at risk if you are posting copyrighted material. Watchtower isn't just going to go after random Reddit users. So if I'm a physically and mentally out Jehovah's Witness and I have a Reddit account, if all I'm doing is talking to people,
That's
Watchtower isn't going to come after me. They're only going to come after me if I say, by the way, I'm just going to post up, that photo that's been leaked from Bethel of, I don't know, Tony Morris walking around in tight pants and a G-string. That's the kind of thing that will get you on their radar. So that's just for people to kind of be aware. If you're going to leak stuff, this is going to be a concern for you. But if you're anonymous on Reddit, but you're just talking, Watchtower isn't coming for you.
That is correct, Covert.
And also, just to be absolutely clear, this document that we're looking at now applies to one Reddit user, not all Reddit users.
Correct.
There is no subpoena that we're aware of for all Reddit users. But we're advising that to steer clear of this sort of subpoena being applied to you, you should be careful about what you post. Is that right?
That is correct. And so what I might add is that if you notice this person's name, ICH3B, well, I noticed that there was a Reddit post from earlier last year, and someone said, hey, thanks very much to Wi-Fi Bandit and to ICH3B for all the stuff they've posted. So what happened was these two individuals, whoever they are, were posting a lot of leaks from Watchtower, everything from the Shepherd the Flock manual to videos from conventions. And Watchtower chose to go after one or two key items that are very innocuous. Convention program, they've chosen to go after that. Sometimes they go after more. Sometimes they go after 4, 5, 20, or 30 documents, as they did in the case of Jason when he ran the Avoid JW. So they pick and choose what they go after. The whole point is to take it down, and secondly, to identify the infringer so they can build a case against who are these leak sources, because they're trying to plug these leaks. And, there are sunshine laws, there are whistleblower laws. I think this is going to be something that we're going to be talking about for quite some time, and it's going to come to a head very soon, because these cases are definitely not going away. But I do want to come back. I'll let you guys finish up, and I want to come back to something.
Can I just say one thing, Mark? Just on this person's username, I think he's one of the best usernames there is out there. It's Ich-Trieb. That's his name, Ich-Trieb, which is German for I was driven. And that's all he did was leak documents. I think he was an elder and he was driven to leak documents. It's a great name.
Indeed.
Brilliant.
So we'll now go to Kim. Kim, I'm fascinated, again, as someone with a legal background, what you make of all this.
Well, look, the simple way that I could explain it to you is I actually know Vincent Toole a little bit, and I know some of the way he operates. And like him and many of the other people that are in Watchtower, they're very insular. They've not worked outside. They've been trained by Watchtower. They quote scriptures as if it's law, and clearly most of the time they've got no relevance, if any. So, they live in a bubble and they think that the law acts a particular way. They are used to people listening to everything that they say as gospel. So, if they are so smart and so much more knowledgeable than everybody else, and they're not used to not getting their own way when it comes to certain things, and whatever they say goes. Specifically in relation to the leaked information, it's very evident. Lloyd, you said something about they became bullies. Well, I think from the very beginning they were bullies. If you look at the definition of bullying, it's, the definition is seeks to harm, intimidate, or coerce someone perceived as vulnerable. So, either coerced to give evidence, to do something, they're pressured to take something down, put something up, or they're strong-armed. And so, I think the activists and anybody that wants to share information, as long as they do follow the recommendations from Reddit that were previously referenced, and I know that you can create one-off email addresses and all of those sorts of things, that as long as they're protecting themselves and being sensible, that they can be comfortable. Both Jason and your letters, were very similar in saying, if you don't want this matter to go to court, do this. They reference costs, but what has actually happened? Nothing's happened to you, Lloyd, nothing's happened to Jason, nothing's significantly happened to anybody else. So it's clearly just that they're doing their best to try and bully their way through the process. And I just don't, it's very evident from the lack of proceeding that they did take against individuals that there's nothing that's going to happen, and that people should continue on, because we don't want the activism to stop or the leaks and the information to stop, because it is so important. People are being cut off from their families. People do have mental health issues. People are dying from not having blood transfusions, and children are being abused. Actually, it has to be addressed, and by that the work that the activists do, that's where people learn, and that's where people wake up, and it's just so important.
That's actually a really powerful point you've made there, Kim, because it would be easy for viewers watching this episode to be scared to death, especially if they are physically in, mentally out, or if they are engaged in undercover activism. They may be tempted to shut up shop, to think, I'm not going to do anything more because the risk is too great. Please do not let this frighten you into silence. That's what Watchtower would like to do. That's what they've tried to do with me. That's what they've tried to do with Jason. They've failed. And they failed because the law is on our side. So
that's exactly right.
By all means, continue to take reasonable precautions. Don't do anything silly. Don't do anything that they could easily come after you for. But let's keep the information flowing, especially if you are inside the organization with access to privileged information that needs to be leaked. Forward it to Jason, forward it to me, forward it to Mark, and we'll make sure it gets out there. So please keep that information coming. Kim, do you think as well, this is kind of, I'm kind of like stating the obvious at this point, I know, but do you think this also speaks to the desperation of Watchtower that they're doing this?
Absolutely. I've been out of the organisation for 10 months, and I can say that in the last 10 months, the amount of people that I have seen join groups, seeking support from people who are out has just increased so quickly, especially in Australia with all of what's been going on with the Australian Royal Commission. These things are extremely damaging to Watchtower. People are just leaving in droves. Congregations are being, I can't go a week on Facebook without seeing a Kingdom Hall in Australia for sale, having been sold. Kingdom Halls are being merged, congregations are being merged. It's damaging, and absolutely.
Indeed.
It's very, very damaging to them.
It's exciting in a way to see them squirming like this. So, Mark, your concluding thoughts?
Okay, well, I need 2 hours, but we don't have it. So
no, you definitely don't have 2 hours. You have maybe 10 minutes max.
Yeah. So look, a couple of things I wanted to bring out. We showed you the spreadsheet earlier with more than 40 cases in the past year that particularly in 2018 and now 4 more cases in 2019 in January, where Watchtower is aggressively going after these leak sources, these apostates, these people that they think are the source, because believe me, a lot of very, very sensitive documents have been leaked, including documents that have not gone out yet publicly. And one of the things I think it's important to remember is that those who are responsible with leaks don't just throw them out there willy-nilly and just because, oh, I leaked a document. This is very strategic. We're trying to help people, or those people are trying to help people. They're trying to help the attorneys that are fighting these cases. It truly is an altruistic, excuse me, it's an altruistic effort to help child abuse victims, to help victims of shunning, to help others create a transparency around this organization. And I'd like to take the time to thank the Truth and Transparency Foundation, which is the guys over at Faith Leaks and Mormon Leaks, because they are right now, they have a massive target on their back because they're hosting.
They basically taken over with Avoid JW, because whenever I go on Avoid JW and I click on like a 1934 Watchtower, it takes me to Faith Leaks.
So the documents are there, and they have very strong legal support. And where they're hosting is not subject to DMCA regulations, so they don't have to worry about DMCA takedowns. But they're gonna have a real
I'm
fight.
sure Jason misses hosting all those documents, being solely responsible for them.
Not at all.
Look, it's a serious thing. So I want to thank Ethan and Ryan over there. They're public, and they're very much interested in exposing what's going on in the Mormon Church, and that led to our connection with them, with the Jehovah's Witnesses. We want transparency because we just don't have it. We have all these people becoming Jehovah's Witnesses. And as Jason has pointed out to me quite accurately many times, when he was, baptized as a JW, they didn't explain to him all the rules. They didn't say, we've got this elder's manual here, and if you break these rules, you're going to be subject to this judicial committee with these 3 men that are going to sit you down, and this is what's going to happen, and you're going to lose contact with your mother and your sister and the rest of your family and all of your friends. They're not transparent. They don't explain these things. And that's why Watchtower is in a lot of trouble right now. And they're in a lot of trouble with GDPR. By the way, to Covert Fade's point, I believe it was Utrecht University, and we can post the link, but you can find that by just Googling Utrecht University, Jehovah's Witnesses, child abuse investigation. It'll pull right up, and we'll also post that link. But these are very serious things. These are very altruistic people that are trying to help people. These are not angry apostates that are trying to burn the Watchtower buildings down and hurt those people. They want to help them. In fact, many of these people are waking up. Think of all these people that are leaking these documents. These are active elders, ministerial servants, and even circuit overseers that are leaking branch organization manuals. Recent ones, not from 10 years ago, but recent ones. These are Bethelites. And, there's no way Watchtower is not able to track these individuals, and they won't, because they are escalating. They're continuing to, there's more and more people wake up. And we have Kim with us that would not have been with us. We started this program 2 years ago during the Fessler trial. Kim was still an active Jehovah's Witness while that was going on. And now she's here with us today, helping us. And
good point. Yeah.
Thank you, Kim, for joining us. But look, a couple of things I want to mention before we wrap it up. Number one, they're going after a lot of people, including a guy named Kevin McFree, who is the pseudonym of the guy who runs the Lego channel. So he's a guy that has this cool little YouTube channel, and he does stop motion animations that are satire.
Very cool.
They are loved by ex-JWs and maybe even some JWs everywhere, because they replicate what goes on inside of a Kingdom Hall, inside of field service. It shows what life is like as a JW. Well, in little tiny clips, they will use like a portion. They used a portion of the July broadcasting that was leaked. And they did it right before the July broadcasting actually came out. And so Watchtower has issued a subpoena to identify that infringer, and has actually said that he did irreparable damage. Their court documents state he did irreparable damage by leaking the July broadcasting before the Watchtower actually produced it on their.
My heart bleeds for Watchtower having
Oh
that.
my God!
Congratulations, Watchtower. Now you're scared of Lego.
They're scared of Lego.
And
So, I want to give a shout out.
At the risk of kind of repeating things too much, they're talking about irreparable damage. What about child abuse cover-ups? That's the sort of times when we reach for that sort of language, Watchtower. And you're talking about that in terms of something you were going to release anyway. You know, like what universe are they in?
It's unbelievable. And then look at the deaths from the blood policy and how that has affected so many lives. We just received a letter from a woman who is fading from the organization, and she was bleeding out during childbirth, and she chose to take a transfusion. Her husband stood by her side. We're going to post this article on JW Survey very soon, but her husband stood by her side and said, "I can't live without you." And she took the transfusion and she lived. And she and her husband have a daughter who's going to have a mother. She said her words to her husband were, "I don't want to be an Eloise," meaning Eloise Dupuis in Canada, who bled out and died because she couldn't take blood. This woman took blood and survived. But more on that. Look, as far as these cases, a shout out to, Lego Kevin McFree. So by the way, he is one of the few people that is fighting this case, because Watchtower wants, they think he's the source of these. He's not the source of these leaks. He just used them in a little tiny portion of it in one of his videos. But they want his identity, or her identity, whoever Kevin McFree is. They want that identity, and they're demanding it. So he's got an attorney, and he's fighting Watchtower. And now Watchtower has, in turn, hired a very, very high-priced New York litigation firm that specializes in copyright law, and they're fighting him. And it is an incredible battle. You're going to hear about it one day when it's all said and done. But
and hopefully reenacted in Lego, I think. We'd all love to see that episode.
Absolutely. So that case, but see, the thing is, Watchtower does not anticipate these people fighting back, because they know that they don't have the legal resources, these people that are posting on Facebook or posting on Instagram, but some people are fighting back. I'm going to leave you with this. There's 2 cases out of the 40, which are very, very interesting. And I'm going to drop a bomb on you guys, and we're going to release it at the same time we do this JW Survey broadcast.
So the bomb that Mark's about to drop will be dropped at the same time that this episode is available. Yeah.
We take a drink before I talk about that.
Wet your whistle at this point, Mark.
So you can tell I'm jacked up about this stuff. This is fascinating to me. This is fascinating to me. I mean, we're going to look back in history, and we talk about the child abuse cases all the time, but I mean, I downloaded, hundreds and hundreds of pages, and I started reading every single case. And out of the 40-some cases, I found 2 cases that were fascinating, involving one was a host provider in New York that failed to honor the subpoena. So in other words, Watchtower got a subpoena, said, give us the identity and IP address of this person. This host just dragged their feet and didn't do it. Watchtower got very litigious. It became very ugly. Finally, the host gave in and provided that, and Watchtower withdrew. But there was another case that is still ongoing, and it is a case where this individual that posted something on Facebook, innocuous, some picture, something not important, posted it on Facebook. Watchtower, just like all the others, went after this individual, and it is case number 7:18 MC471. These are all miscellaneous cases filed in the United States Southern District of New York, which, by the way, is interesting because that is the Southern District that you hear about Donald Trump and the investigation going into him with the Southern District. It's also the subject of the Showtime show Billions. It's a notoriously interesting district, federal district court. So anyway, Facebook failed to respond to the subpoena. So the judge signed the subpoena in this case. This is back in October. Facebook failed to respond. Watchtower wrote him a letter and said, you need to comply. Wrote him 1 letter. Facebook didn't respond. Don't know why. Wrote him a 2nd letter. Facebook didn't respond. wrote Facebook a third letter, said, you must comply. This is a court-ordered subpoena. Finally, now this is just a few weeks ago, a letter was dated January 24th, 2019, signed by Paul D. Polidoro. We've talked about Polidoro. And by the way, he's the attorney for Watchtower that went to the Supreme Court and fought that Stratton versus Ohio case. He was the one that argued before the Supreme Court for the right to go door to door without paying a permit. Okay, and Watchtower won that. So Polidoro writes this letter, a 3-page letter to the judge on January 24th, 2019, right? So that's just over 3 weeks ago. And it's in regard to the subpoena to Facebook. Dear Judge Seibel, I represent Watchtower Bible and Tract Society in connection with the above referenced matter. Watchtower respectfully submits this letter pursuant to Rule 2A of the court's individual rules of practice. We kindly request a pre-motion conference in connection with an anticipated motion for contempt. So what they are saying is that they are going to argue to hold Facebook in contempt of court for failing to produce documents.
Oh, well, they'd know all about that, wouldn't they?
Well, it gets better. You're going to love the language here. So it talks about, I'm not going to read every paragraph. It's a 3-page letter. So it talks about the infringement of several copyrighted works. It says, to make matters worse, these copyrighted works were posted by the Facebook user before Watchtower released them. So they're upset.
Which probably caused irreparable damage.
Irreparable damage, yeah. Poor Watchtower. And then it says, as the owner of the infringed works, Watchtower is entitled to seek redress from the court for what it in good faith believes is an infringement of its works. And it goes on to quote a court case here. And let me just jump ahead. It says, on October 8th, 2018, Watchtower sent a DMCA compliant copyright infringement notice to Facebook's designated DMCA agent. Having sent the notice, Watchtower was also entitled to request the clerk of any United States District Court to issue the subpoena to the service provider for the identification of the alleged infringer. They really want to know who this person is. On October 15th, Watchtower applied to this court for such a subpoena seeking identifying information for the Facebook user that posted the infringing work. Let's skip ahead a bit. They say the court has the power under this rule to impose contempt simply on the basis of failure to comply with a subpoena. And then they cite a case in which someone was held in contempt and was fined a dollar amount for each day they didn't produce the documents.
Oh, here we go.
Here we go. Watchtower is not interested in seeking draconian sanctions. Watchtower simply wants Facebook to comply with its obligation as a service provider subject to DMCA. Without Facebook's compliance, Watchtower is effectively prevented from pursuing copyright infringement claim against the infringer because it cannot serve a summons to complaint without the infringer's identifying information. Finally, since Facebook has not responded to the DMCA subpoena or Watchtower's letters, there is a real threat that Facebook has not undertaken to preserve the subpoenaed information. Service providers typically retain user activity logs containing the information sought for a limited period of time. Once that user data is deleted, there is no other means of identifying the user who posted the infringing material. So they're saying, look, there's a time limit. Facebook's going to delete this data. We want it now. And finally, here's the big statement they make at the end of the letter. Watchtower's anticipated motion for contempt will petition this court to direct Facebook to produce the documents sought by the DMCA subpoena immediately or at such later time as the court may direct. Number 2, sanction Facebook in an amount to be set by this court for each day after the determined compliance deadline that Facebook fails to comply with this court's order. And number 3, for such and further relief as this court may deem just and proper. And so what's going on here, I can show you one final screenshot and wrap this up. So what's going on here is that we have got an issue where Watchtower is literally serving a subpoena against Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg And you can see evidence of this. This document is dated January 29th, 2019, Watchtower versus Facebook. And it gives a little bit more information there at the bottom, and we'll get these documents posted. They're public documents. But notice this, they've actually named the officers of Facebook, and they're literally going after Mark Zuckerberg, Dave Kling, and Dave Werner. These are the CEO, the secretary, and the CFO of Facebook.
And they have doing that. They're also hypocritically applying a by-day monetary charge in the same style as they themselves ignored in child sex abuse cases.
It is exactly what they're doing.
I was going to say they've been on the other side of this. They've been the people refusing to accept court orders to produce documents, not just to identify a copyright leaker, but to assist in a child abuse trial.
It's almost like a sick joke, isn't it?
They have no awareness.
Satan's system did this to us, so we're going to do it straight back. And quite frankly, Watchtower, I fancy Mark Zuckerberg over your legal team. Based on your total incompetence, I think I fancy Facebook's lawyers.
The interesting
that was my
thing.
point. I was going to say that.
Yeah, go ahead, Kim.
I was just going to say we've seen the incompetence of Watchtower in respect of the amount of losses that they've, sustained. The fact that they're ignoring them is a very clear indicator that Mark Zuckerberg's very highly paid solicitors and attorneys have absolutely no interest in any concerns that Watchtower have made. So clearly their strong army is not going to work.
I have to say for the record that I don't know the reason Facebook is not complying with this particular subpoena, because they have complied with several other subpoenas, and including that person that goes by JW Kevin, who posted those 4 pictures. Well, that person attempted to fight that subpoena with his own motion to quash, but ultimately Facebook gave up that information, which meant that, gave up whatever that person's email address was, whatever their IP address was that they're using. It's very, very personal information. So in this case, we don't know if it's incompetence. We don't know why Facebook, if they're just ignoring it, they're saying we don't want to be bothered, or Zuckerberg's attorneys finally got a hold of this. And by the way, they use outside firms. So they have outside firms that defend Facebook for all manner of, obviously they spend millions of dollars defending themselves in court. We just don't know why Facebook is dragging their feet, but Watchtower there's much more to this story, but they have enjoined, high-end legal means to go after Facebook and demand a daily fine for failure to produce documents. So for those viewers that have been watching our program, know that in multiple cases in California, Erwin Zalkin and his team have asked the court to issue fines on behalf of the plaintiffs for failure to produce the demanded child abuse documents. So when it's in their favor, Watchtower will make these demands of these, individuals on Facebook and try to squeeze blood from the turnip. But when it comes to their documents that have been demanded by the court, they will not comply.
And on that bombshell, we must bring this 2-hour epic to a close. But wow, thank you for that, Mark. And I think, again, you can just hop on over to JW Survey and see more information on that particular story, which we're breaking for you there. But wow, just incredible incompetence. And I just want to further reiterate Kim's sentiments before. It could be that you are watching this and you're feeling anxious because we've just unmasked this extremely vindictive, malicious, threatening, litigious organization that we perhaps didn't fully appreciate was there before. But there's no reason to be scared, because the whole reason Watchtower is doing this is because they're desperate, because they are fighting a losing battle, and all they have is hot air. I'm not taking them seriously. Jason doesn't appear to be quivering in his boots. And so it's business as usual as far as activists are concerned. and there's no reason for you to be scared. But I do want to thank all of our panelists who've joined us here today. Thank you to Mark, to Covert. Thank you also to Jason and to Kim. Your insights have been appreciated.
Thank you, Lloyd. Thanks for making it happen.
Thanks, Lloyd.
Thanks, guys.
So viewers, I do hope you have enjoyed this marathon episode. Please don't forget to subscribe to the John Cedars channel for more such videos. But for now, thank you so much for watching.